Hello, everyone. I hope you're all happy and healthy along with your respected families wherever you're located on this God's green earth. Welcome to today's episode of the Real Talks with Amini, and I'm honored to be joined by Mr. Cees Roels, a seasoned diplomat, a practitioner with over 4 decades of experience in various hotspots around the world, but particularly with the ISAF mission in Afghanistan and the Resolute support mission in Afghanistan. He was a diplomat with the Netherlands Foreign Affairs Ministry. He's a retired diplomat now, but a keen observer of the situation in Afghanistan and throughout the region and around the world. And we're honored to have him, and we'll draw from his experience during his time in Afghanistan to understand the situation there and past, present, as well as possible futures for Afghanistan. So please stay with us. It will be a fascinating conversation with Mr. Cees Roels. Welcome on the show, Mr. Cees. Thank you for giving us the time to speak with you. And maybe we can start by getting your overall assessment of the international community's engagement in Afghanistan during the past 2 decades when they were involved directly in Afghanistan, significantly in various aspects of the social, political, military life of the country. From your perspective, what were some of the achievements of the international community in Afghanistan, and what were some of the shortcomings or the failures of the international community in Afghanistan?
Well, thank you very much, Sadiq, for having me. I'm a great fan of your podcast, and I think a lot of the people here in the Netherlands, because I'm now talking with you from the Netherlands, obviously, we are still very keen in Afghanistan. It's not a forgotten issue, although in the media, of course, nowadays we see a lot of other hotbeds in the world, hotspots, and also kind of issues. And of course, we are very close by Ukraine crisis, so it's for Europe a very different perspective. But again, it's a very important subject, and we will come back later to it because I think if we jump ahead, nowadays we are seeing an elevated threat level also in Europe, also in the Netherlands. And if we look to travel advisories, for instance, lately I saw it from Canada, they're actually warning their citizens traveling to Europe for this elevated threat level, which is very much related to the spillover, I think, of kind of jihadist extremism, which we nowadays also are seeing around us here in Europe. So it's very, very relevant still to keep in mind that Afghanistan is a very important
Mhm.
area of interest.
Yep.
So to come back to 20 years, maybe I just give a few insights in my background. I was a junior diplomat when I went to the Philippines, which was after the dictatorship of Marcos.
Mhm.
And that's the first time I witnessed a kind of post-conflict area, how to build up democracy, how to build up a kind of market system which is functioning. So ever since I've seen different parts of Africa. Unfortunately, I witnessed also part of the genocide in the Great Lakes areas
Mhm.
and the aftermath.
Yeah.
I spent a long time in South Asia. I was in India when 9/11 happened.
Mm.
So, and that was for me a kind of starting point, to have a keen interest in what was at that time already happening in Afghanistan. And maybe to just throw in one very important experience I had, almost an anecdote
Mhm.
of this 9/11, the evening
Mhm.
it happened. I was in a reception with diplomats, and I never forget that both from India, some think tank people, and also from Israel, who was represented in New Delhi, who suddenly said, to us and to American colleagues, we told you so. In other words, a lot of people around Afghanistan already had a feeling
Mhm.
that something was going the wrong direction. And of course, we have seen the incident, the attack to Massoud the day before. Actually, that was the day before.
Yeah.
So I think that really put me in the system dealing with Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
I spent almost 4 years in Islamabad immediately after 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen a change within Pakistan, but also we opened an embassy in Kabul around 2002, 3,
Mm-hmm.
first an office, and then it became a full-fledged embassy. So the first time I went to Kabul was around 2003, when maybe the end of 2002, when we started having an official diplomatic representation. So at that time, I still remember, it was like being in a kind of very upbeat, very nice area, walking in Kabul, going to a restaurant, talking to people. So I think my first impression was this is an amazing country and an amazing city, very lively.
Mm-hmm.
It's always good to keep this in mind because we are extremely pessimistic, extremely depressed. But I have seen also, I'm quite lucky, a totally different atmosphere, almost euphoric. But anyway, um, so my first experience was very positive, but there was a lot of work to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember from Pakistan, we started, talking about, okay, what are we going to do in terms of stability? What are we going to do about, issues like education, health, and all the other issues? So it was a very kind of positive, optimistic approach, and a lot of people were caught, in that system, in this idea. Um, but then something happened. I think it was Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you remember, suddenly the attention went away from Kabul, from Afghanistan to another part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of military activities were diverted.
Mm-hmm.
And being European, I mean, we looked to it from a very different perspective. We thought, oh gosh, now things might change. So, and that is an important starting point for the Netherlands and other European allies
Mm-hmm.
who took over certain responsibilities
Sure.
from the US.
Mm-hmm.
The Netherlands went to the south. We became active in Oeruzgan with Australian, Canadians, British. We went to the south,
Mm-hmm.
and I never forget that a lot of people were saying, "Well, that's not very wise because it's a very complicated area." But I think we went there quite well prepared, maybe not military well prepared because it was a very small setup. But I think in terms of looking into post-conflict, looking into a right balance of civilian and military intervention, I think we found the right balance.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the start of what we called in the Netherlands, the 3 Ds. It was about development, defense, and democracy. The three elements very important to build up.
Mm-hmm.
From hindsight, you can say that we were probably over optimistic and maybe not realistic. Um, Although a lot of people, allies, with including Canadians and British and I think also Americans, we all believed that we could change a lot of things from the outside. And I cannot recall any kind of arrogant approach. It was like talking endlessly with elderly in the villages, going there. But threat levels increased already in those days. You notice that Taliban was regrouping, reorganizing. They were finding safe havens in the south, also over the border in Pakistan. So there was a sense of this is not a post-conflict
Mm-hmm.
buildup of a democracy. This is something different. This might turn out to be even a war. I think so. Around 2005, I think the sense was this is not an easy task. It's not developing in a way we wish
Mm-hmm.
it would.
Yeah.
So I think this is the moment I left at some point Pakistan and also Afghanistan
Hmm.
to go for another task. So I remember the final days before I left in 2006 in the summer. I had a feeling um, this is not a like peace dividend kind of situation. This is really counterinsurgency. This is going to be very complicated.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure you, given your extensive level of engagement from the early days of the mission in Afghanistan, you've observed not just the Netherlands engagement, but also other European countries and also United States. So, if you look at the final years or the chapter closing of the mission in Afghanistan, what do you think went wrong in the final years when the U.S. and the international community were preparing to withdraw from Afghanistan, that we couldn't be able to sustain the achievements that was gained in Afghanistan, that everything collapsed all of a sudden? From your perspective, what were the key triggers that led to the collapse of the mission in Afghanistan?
Yeah. Well, I think I came back in 2010
Mhm.
in Kandahar for as an advisor to the NATO mission there in the south. That was during the surge. I think then it was already visible that this was more a war-like situation than anything else. Although, to be honest, the whole PR campaigns in Europe, including in the Netherlands, were very much about, you know, it's a peaceful situation. Sometimes we have counterinsurgency, but overall we can do a good job in terms of development, you know. So talking about the defense element was pushed aside. I think so. In a way, the first mistake we made in 2010 is, the bright shining lie, if you might say, that everything was under control. It was not under control.
Mhm.
I think military, we did everything possible, like in Helmand, in Kandahar. I think it was not possible to do more than that. It was also very lethal. We lost a lot of people. A lot of Afghans were killed. I think we couldn't find the right way. We talked about population-centered approach, to protect the people and winning hearts and minds. But I think that was, from hindsight, too optimistic. Like to give you one example, what went wrong. We were almost replacing the ANA, the Afghan forces, and police, because we said, okay, wait, we will do some job. We create a situation, then we bring you back in. So the first mistake was not starting immediately in 2002 to do immediately a kind of a combined approach, to say, okay, you have to do the work, we assist you,
Mhm.
and not in the by having consultants or really walking together in the field, doing things together. That started only very late.
Yeah.
So by the time like in around 2012-14, you saw the change. The great architect was Ghani at that time as an advisor. Istakal, the transfer of responsibilities to the ANA, the defense system. So I think there we were too late. We should have done it immediately. It doesn't work if you say, okay, we're going to do the job for you because we are perfect. We have all the resources, all the capacity, all the money, and we will solve the problem of stability. I think we should have been much more humble and say, okay, maybe not it's the optimal way to deal with counterinsurgency, but at least it's a way which is sustainable for the long term.
Mhm.
So that is, I think, one of the first lessons.
Got it.
And after that, in 2014, I think we simply didn't walk the talk. We said, okay, we transfer, but then what? How are you going to do it? The transfer of capacity and knowledge and military systems is a very complicated task. I saw personally discussions in headquarters in Kabul where I always thought, we are not all the right people to transfer knowledge. Maybe we have brilliant generals, brilliant military, brilliant diplomats, but to transfer knowledge to somebody else in a different cultural context is very complicated. So I think the second lesson is um, transfer knowledge, educating, supporting systems, and strengthening institutions is a very difficult task, and you need experts. You don't need consultants because they come in and fly out.
Yeah.
You need long-term capacity, and that's very complicated. So I think that was for me lesson, the other lesson. Now, I talked about institutions. I thought that we could get rid of corruption, we could get rid of institutional weaknesses in Kabul, for instance, in the Ministry of Defense. The problem was we found the right people, and I spoke with a lot of excellent Afghan military leaders, and also people doing the job. The problem is the interface between the Ministry of Defense, the institution, and politics was creating a lot of problems. This was during Karzai, and it was repeated during Ghani. There was no difference. So I'm not distinguishing, the one was brilliant, the other was not brilliant. No, it's nonsense. The structural deficiencies were in both leadership systems. And I'm saying this because, this is building up lessons learned. If we have another situation in another part of the world, we have to learn from this experience. So institutions and politics is a very complicated issue. And to jump ahead, during the crisis in 2021, we saw there was a total breakdown of the institutional system, not because the military were not willing to fight, not because they were not able to fight. No, because the intervention by the political leadership was leading to a disaster. And it's not so much the president himself, but the guys around him, I always call them the whiskey boys, they were actually having their own agenda. And they were very clever guys. They talked our language. They could, let's have a whiskey. That's why I call them the whiskey boys. But can you imagine? Well, you have been there, and you remember those days. Very nice talk. Nice meeting, smooth. But that was a facade. Behind it was corruption. So I think that a lot of people are criticizing the Afghan armed forces. I don't agree with that. Although there might be leaders who are corrupt, but basically the institution itself was never built up in a solid way. We flew in a lot of consultants, and they left already in the spring of 21. So the whole thing collapsed.
Yeah.
So that's one. The other thing is the political leadership had no positive influence reinforcing and strengthening the institutions. No, they actually weakened them. So that's another very important lesson to be learned. But we have to be humble, because how can we influence a political system? It's very complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe these are just a few elements. And I think another important element was you have to talk with your enemy. So we tried to do this in Kandahar. And I remember some of the in-betweens, the talks we had with a few people on the ground, local leadership. But to be honest, local ownership, a local leadership of Taliban was also very corrupted. They gave, imagine you're in Uruzgan and you have to ship in the goodies for the military guys, How are you going to do it? By air? It's impossible. So it was over the road. So what happened is, how can you have a free pass going from the border to Uruzgan?
Mm,
Who's going to check? Who's going to guarantee security? Well, partly the Taliban.
mm,
So we already started colluding with our enemy. Yeah. And I think this, I haven't seen it happening everywhere, but I'm not fully aware of what happened in other parts. But I suspect a lot of the collusion already took place. So another thing is if you want to talk with your enemy, you have to do it on using certain red lines.
mm,
And maybe a last remark. I remember Kandahar, huge and very. I was always very much impressed by the quality of the leadership and also by the military. But there was also another aspect. I find it sometimes overdone how much luxury there was. You know, being on the boardwalk in Kandahar, I always felt, this is not possible. I was not used to that as a diplomat in Africa.
mm,
I never, we lived a life basically of people around us, not much more. Maybe we had the basics, but no luxury. And I was quite shocked sometimes. And I think McChrystal was right when he said, I want to break it down and make it simple. And maybe that was because we were not able to integrate fully with the ANA in the beginning because these guys, how are we going to eat their food? Of course you can eat their food. It's nonsense. But, we had a feeling like we have to at a higher level because we deserve it. And these guys, okay, that's their way of life.
mm. Yeah,
So I
well,
hope I gave you a few elements which I experienced myself.
yeah. Mr. Keys, it was fascinating, very comprehensive. A lot of food for thought for the policymakers and practitioners and anyone who is a keen observer of the situation in Afghanistan, but also conflict zones around the world. To just hear you describe all of these aspects where we could draw lessons is amazing. Thank you so much for being truthful about it and to be honest and transparent about all of the key aspects of the international community's engagement in Afghanistan that led to the failure of the mission at the end. So, if I could get your sense about international communities' perspective at a time, or the knowledge base at a time related to the roles of the regional countries, did the international community properly understood and were equipped or were able to advise their Afghan counterparts on how to manage their relationship with Russia, for example, or with China, or with Iran, or with elements in Pakistan who were all, in a way, had eventually unified in their collective mission to get rid of the international community in Afghanistan, or to make sure that this new setup that was being built by international community in NATO would collapse or would fail. Did the international community understood that adversarial role and were able to manage those relationships?
Well, that's a very good question because when I was in Kandahar as a political advisor, we always talked about the safe havens, and the support that came across the border.
Yeah.
First of all, I had an advantage because I was in Islamabad for 4 years and I knew a lot of people and I understood the system and also the complications in terms of the regional geopolitical setting, with India especially. So because I was both 4 years in India and in Pakistan, so I could understand that Afghanistan was partly a almost manipulated, in a way, because some like India might have interest there and Pakistan had. So it was you felt sometimes a sense of that it was not very right to use Afghanistan as a jumping board, for other reasons, for political opportunistic reasons. So I think that was one important element. I think that we tried really to convince the leadership in Islamabad in those days that it was not only creating a problem for the Allied, for the NATO people, but and also the Afghans in terms of terrorist attacks and continuous inflows of new Taliban leadership, from Quetta, from Peshawar. So we told them, this is not only a problem for us, it's also for you. Because in the end, you will pay the price as well. It's not maybe not on the short term, but on the long term, you create such an instability that it will hit back to you as well. Well, if you look at the present day situation, I think we were quite right back in 2010 when we had this interactions. Did we take it serious enough, leading to the crisis in 21? I don't think so. But of course, I was not continuously in headquarters in Kabul or in headquarters in Washington or NATO. So I'm not sure whether I missed something out. But I always had a feeling we underestimated the negative impact from the safe havens, from the ideological support, maybe even from the military support. So I think we should have taken more, to take more a view of you need more regional approach.
Mm.
But again, we tried.
Mm.
We tried. We did it with India, we did it with Pakistan. I spoke a lot with Russians at the embassy uh, because I considered them as very experienced because they were in Afghanistan. They had a similar approach. They tried to do the same things and they failed. Uh, so I think it was very useful to talk with them. But again, well, maybe I have to phrase it in a different way. It was not only about the regional balance, it also was when you show weakness as NATO, and that's, I think we did it in 2021
Mm.
and leading to 21. We showed a weakness and we have to pay the price for this.
Yeah.
So that element was also very much underestimated. We thought about, okay, let's leave. And in a way, I will not blame Washington for this because there we were often free riding as well, although we did a lot of things. And in Afghanistan, I think, especially in the Netherlands, we did even too much in terms of our capacity, military capacity, and we lost people. So it's not that we didn't try.
Yeah.
But we also were relying a lot on the major capacity of the US and other, especially the British as well. They were very, very well organized there. So, but I think we underestimated in the end in 2021 that the impact of in leaving the country as we did
Mhm.
would have a negative impact on the geopolitical situation and our position in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you describe the current situation right now, it's almost more than 4 years now that the Taliban have taken over the country and have turned the country into basically a terrorist training ground, the gender apartheid,
Mhm.
and all of the, tragedies that are taking place right now. What do you think is the perspective of the Netherlands towards the situation, or broadly the European perspective towards the situation? Do they understand the level of threat that this new regime has created towards them? You described, how the collapse led to a sign of weakness that led to the situation in Ukraine, and what are other aspects that people are concerned about, or when they look at Afghanistan, what do they see, and what do you see?
Well, I think there are different. The impact of this was, I think, not only related to Afghanistan. If you look to Africa nowadays, I mean, the breeding place in terms of terrorists is actually there at this moment. It has an enormous impact, but it's very much underestimated. Europe left Africa. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but what you see, I think the France left already in the beginning of the summer, the last military left. I think we have a major problem there. And but the appetite to go in, to intervene, to repeat something we did in Afghanistan, even in a better way, you don't see, there's no interest. I think we are afraid to make mistakes again, and we think it's too costly, and we think there's no benefit, and in the end we will lose again. So we're not very brave overall. So even in Africa, you see a similar situation now. Withdrawal, and who's filling the gap?
Mm.
It's very clear. It's partly China, which is very much related to resources, but resources are also extremely important if you talk about defense, about hardware. So that's one something we really underestimated. But also look at Wagner, the Wagner group from Russia. They are there. Yeah. And even Iran is moving. So in as a long-term perspective, we are creating a vacuum which is filled by others.
Mhm.
And coming back to Afghanistan, what you see is that there is a kind of feeling now. We did everything, and we don't know how to deal with Afghanistan now. So you see a lot of people are moving in the direction, let's make a deal. Let's accept that there is a Taliban now. That's one very strong tendency now. Unfortunate. I don't agree with it, but I see it. The other one is we are not patient. I remember one of the British generals always say, we need strategic patience, to win a war. Because a war is not like a battle, it's a long-term situation.
Mhm.
So strategic patience can also mean, don't support the Taliban, don't acknowledge them, don't make a deal with them, you know, isolate them. And for how long? Yes, okay. We have still the idea that we can assist the Afghans by making a deal with the Taliban, and then we're helping them in the humanitarian disaster they are living. It's stupid. It's the same stupidity as we did, with it, bona fide, but we did it also over the 20 years. We overestimated our impact, and we are going to do it again, I'm afraid. So that's one. The other thing is we have a major diaspora now of Afghans. And they do very well in Europe. I mean, the first generation of the 90s, they're actually producing the best doctors and what have you. The second one, the early days of the evacuation, we have top people. So they are fully aware of the limitations of what we can do. But there's also a diaspora which is second generation or even third, and they have some kind of romantic idea about Afghanistan. And it includes the Taliban as well.
Mhm.
And they say if they travel, and they go there actually, it's very interesting. They go there and they say, well, no, it's very secure. And these guys are nice to us, you know? So the propaganda is very strong now, very strong. And one of the elements of the propaganda is also, and this is a risk, what we call the Deobandi, the kind of, we don't not fully understand this in Europe or in the US maybe, but since I came from India and Pakistan and also from Afghanistan, I fully understand the kind of jihadist approach. And it worries me a lot. And also some of the diaspora is very much aware, they see it now. When we have demonstrations, dealing with Gaza, I see the banners, which are exactly the same banners
Mhm.
you might see in Kabul.
Yeah.
So it's there, and we underestimate it. I think it's a real danger. It's almost leading to a situation which is very close to 9/11.
Mhm. Yeah.
But maybe I'm too pessimistic, but I think we have to be very careful.
Yeah.
So that's
Well, as an
certain
Afghan, I
elements.
could say, Mr. Keys, you're very realistic. You're not
Yeah.
pessimistic. That is the reality of the situation, is that
Mhm.
Taliban is a terrorist organization with all definitions of terrorism. Having
Mhm.
them in charge of a governance does not make it less so. And we had them previously in charge of Afghanistan for 6 years, and we saw how they hosted all of the terrorist groups, including Al Qaeda, and then we saw what happened in 9/11. And so right now, once again, they are in charge, and all of the terrorist group, including Al Qaeda, are also there. Now there's ISIS-K also in Afghanistan. They're indicating as if they have issues, but they're one and the same. They're all former Taliban commanders being part of the ISIS-K, and it's a good way for them to have ISIS-K conduct attacks, and then they say that we didn't do it, they did it, and then they make themselves relevant. They get to European capitals and other countries' capitals, and then they support ISIS-K to facilitate them for them to do more attacks. So they become more relevant in a way, good cop, bad cop, and they think the whole world is stupid. They don't understand, but they do. People like you and people like us, we are making sure that the world understand that these terrorists, Shia, Sunnis, this and that, they're all the same. They're anti-West, they're anti-modernity, they're anti-progressiveness. If they are willing to kill their own Muslim brothers and sisters because just they are having a different view, then you can imagine what is their perspective towards the other people who they think, and from their perspective, are non-believers. These are terrorists. They need to be eliminated.
Mhm.
They need to be behind bars. We cannot allow them to be free and roaming around, and let alone having be in charge of governance or having access to data of the population and having access to embassies. I think it's crazy. And the idea that, as you rightly indicated, engaging with them to help the people of Afghanistan, that was tried before. You paid them to
Yeah.
facilitate your convoys to get to Afghanistan, and that led to their empowerment. They became much more
Yeah.
stronger with the money and
Yeah.
finances that they got from the international forces. How could you fight them if you're paying them? That doesn't work. Those were counter productive policies. And right now, also, again, helping the people of Afghanistan by paying this group in charge, they're putting them all in their own pockets and paying their own terrorists, using the same money to come after you. I think hopefully people will realize, as you indicated, that it is the circumstances close to years before 9/11. It feels as if that way. And God forbid that something terrible doesn't happen. Hopefully, people will take action before that, and we get rid of this terrorist group. So,
But maybe because what you say triggers me also. I think it's always a problem not to go into the trap of fall in the trap of complot theories, and what have you. But I always, when people talk to me and say, we should assist the poor people of Afghanistan, I said yes, but don't forget, Seeker in the latest report said we spent already since 2021 $10 billion and a lot of cash, really cash transfers.
yeah.
We have a lot of UN support. We have a lot of NGOs. A lot of money was stolen by the Taliban, whether it was collusion, whether they immediately took it, or they said, even not spending themselves, but they said, listen, this is my money, this is my support.
Yeah.
So, and by doing this, what they did, they substituted their own money they had, because they sit on a lot of money, to support a militaristic, repressive system and to buy out all these fighters, because what are you going to do with all those fighters? Well, a lot of them are running to TTP in Pakistan already.
Mhm.
But, what are you going to do with them? So you pay them off. So the whole system, the whole economy, they say it's growing. Yes, it's growing because you subsidize all these fighters and all these people without spending a dollar on, humanitarian assistance because they want others to pay for this.
Yeah.
So this is one major issue. The other issue is, and I'm really shocked by that. I saw a few interviews with Afghans living in the Netherlands who say, yes, it's true that, the way women are treated and girls is terrible. But there's more than that. Well, my response would be, no, there's nothing more than that. It's not only about that we are, like a feeling of, oh, we sympathize with them. We
Mhm.
have to be empathetic, with the girls and the women. No, it's the core of the extremist ideology to make women totally without a face
Yeah.
as a breeding ground for new terrorists.
Hmm.
Because they send the boys, which is also terrible, to
Hmm.
the madrasas.
Yeah.
Again, the madrasas are developing like crazy, And, you know, the girls, we use them to create the boys, to put them in the madrasa and to have new
Yeah.
generation of terrorists.
Hmm.
That's what's happening.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it's not something like, okay, oh yes, I totally forgot, the girls are not going to school. No, no, it's a core doctrine. It's nothing about whether we are, some people say, oh, you're typically woke, you talk about the girls. No, 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 it's nothing to, it's the core of the extremist system in Afghanistan.
Absolutely.
So that's what we have to focus on and deal with. So
Absolutely.
that would be, but I think maybe to continue, because you asked me what are the lessons learned and what do we see happening now? Well, first of all, we had all these Afghan embassies in the world, and most of them are, representing the old republic,
Hmm.
but that's maybe an empty idea now. But they were representing, a generation of Afghans which learn to think in terms of democracy, about, a totally open-minded approach.
Hmm.
Even criticizing corruption, criticizing the West when they failed, very good, but they were independent. And what I see now is more and more, slowly, that these embassies are changing.
Hmm.
Germany is an example. There's a discussion going on now in Washington, I understand. At least pressure on the administration to accept Afghan diplomats, Taliban diplomats. I think it's not something like business as usual. It's very dangerous. Why is it dangerous? Not because we have a Taliban guy in a suit sitting in The Hague. No,
Hmm.
no, no. It's because they have the monopoly of interacting with the diaspora. Documents. Well, I don't talk about passports because why should you fly to Afghanistan? But anyway, the whole documentary system, the consular system, is in the hands of those guys. So when you knock on their door and you say, my sister in Patia needs some money or a document,
Hmm.
they know exactly who they have to find in the village
Yep.
and maybe kill, detain, or whatever. It's a very dangerous situation.
Absolutely.
And it's also very much underestimated. So it's not
Absolutely.
only about relations, diplomatic, it's about the core of the diaspora community is threatened by this kind of diplomats.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. You're correct on all of that. And another response to anybody who says that Afghanistan is secure, somebody should ask them for whom?
Yeah,
For whom is it secure? So only for the Taliban and their sympathizers and their supporters. And for you, when you do a propaganda tour, if you do a video recording and go and do some interviews or with a foreign passport, of course, they don't hurt you now because they want you. They want you, your support. They want the embassies. They want the
yeah,
legitimacy. But once they get to that point, they will come and after you. They will hurt you. They don't. I mean, they would force you to convert. They will make you re-Muslim again. For those who feel like they're Muslims and
yeah,
they're Muslim, they will make you re-Muslim once again, and they will make sure that your wives and daughters are imprisoned in the house. And as you said, it's the core of their strategy because who's going to be there to filter out if they're training all of these
hmm,
boys as terrorists, then the
yeah,
fathers are either killed, they're also terrorists, or they're also working and day laborers or whatever. I mean, it's only the moms at home. If they had knowledge, if they had education, they would tell their children that this is wrong, that you shouldn't do this. Even if you're going to the madrasa, this is you don't have to kill people. But if
yeah,
their mothers are uneducated and if their mothers are being treated as prisoners in their households, then there's no checks. And if their sons are being trained to hate their mothers, then there's no way to stop anything put into the brains of these kids when they grow up. And we hear that they've been told that their instructors are telling all of these children that we did our mission, we did the 9/11, and then we came back and took over this estate. So now we're going to facilitate for you to do the next phase, to go after all of these non-believers. We're going to train you so you can take over the whole world and fulfill the mission that
yeah,
they have. So So we understand it's really much more dangerous than what it was in their first regime. I hope relevant people are listening and they will take note and they will take this seriously. So now, Mr. Keys, if we can look at the situation, there's another angle to the terrorist regime or terrorist state that are there in Afghanistan. Is that right now it appears that the Russians have invested in this. The Russian recognition. There are talks about how Russians are trying to facilitate to hand over anti-air missiles to the Taliban. There are embedded advisors from Russia, from IRGC with the Taliban leadership. That they are working together with all of the security sector, Ministry of Defense, Interior, everywhere. They're advising them, and then Chinese are financing them. So having a terrorist regime, and then now that terrorist regime being a proxy of an authoritarian regime in the neighborhood, how much does that adds to the threat level of, in terms of asymmetric threat towards the West and towards the world? Because we know that Chinese and Russians and others may not be able to directly take on the world, but if they utilize terrorism and unleash terrorist groups against the West, I mean, that could be very dangerous. Do people understand that threat? And in your perspective, are they able to then utilize that knowledge to understand this expansion of the terrorist regime by taking over these Afghan embassies, or basically all, you can say, operating cells for all of the Russian and Chinese and Iranian agents to have access to all of these capitals through these terrorist agents.
Yeah, well, that's I think it's maybe too early, but again, at the same time, too late to have a full idea about the impact at this moment. I think, well, we have to define certain scenarios and risks. So, okay, we know that there are Taliban diplomats in Moscow now, for sure. They are there. What would be the impact? Well, in the beginning, it will be very symbolic. I don't think there are still a lot of Afghan um, refugees going to Russia. I mean, they go directly to other parts of the world. So I don't think there's an immediate impact. But we don't know how the situation in Ukraine will end up. Will it stop soon? Will there be a kind of deal? Will there be a ceasefire? I don't know. I'm not an expert on this. But if it continues as a war-like situation, I know that the Russians they need support. They need people. They need um, the guys who probably are going to get killed within a few weeks. But the question is, are they only interested in North Korea, or also looking to other parts and green pastures, like, for instance, the militia or the fighters from Taliban? I read already some reports that there was an impact there was a kind of cooperation between Hamas and Taliban
Mhm.
in the early days, in at the end of 23, beginning of 24. I don't know how it is now. I'm not an expert. I don't have access to intel, but certain scenarios are possible. So this is one scenario. In terms of China, my feeling is always it's about resources. It's not so much about politics or war or destabilization of the West. I think it would be in the interest of China to have a very strong Europe, which is looking positively to China as a market. So I don't think it would be in the interest of China to destabilize the West by creating a kind of terrorist hideout, in Afghanistan. But in terms of resources, yes, they want resources, and they need transport systems. So it's true. Um, another interesting development is that Iran and also Pakistan sent back a million, well, probably almost close to 2 million people. The question is, why are they doing this? Only because they don't like them to be in their own state. I think overall they were quite successful, or they were assisting in doing labor, which a lot of people don't like. So why are they sending them back? Is it to destabilize maybe Afghanistan? So the question we are asking ourselves now, is there a countervailing power against Afghanistan now happening? I know this meeting in Islamabad was postponed, but I'm always a bit suspicious about this kind of meetings because I feel, is it only because Pakistan has an interest to create an opposition, or are they interested to see how far they can go to create a countervailing power, not to make Taliban too strong, which is also against their interest? I don't know what's happening in Iran, to be honest, but the impact is enormous on Afghanistan. To get all these people back. So I think to answer your question, I don't know what kind of scenario will take place, but we have to keep in mind that, as you say, it's a risky situation and it might have an impact. And some countries, even Russia, maybe more Russia than other countries, might take advantage of this.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, let's see how the situation evolves. The Afghan perspective towards the situation is that, the Russians have always pursued a policy and agenda of controlling or subjugating Afghanistan,
Hmm.
and they tried it through the communism platform. That did not work. It got failed. Then they shifted now to an extremist platform, and now this is the second time that they're succeeding in taking over the country, and they're erasing all of the national identity and everything, all the symbols that makes Afghanistan to be Afghanistan, and turning it into an extremist population that they could then unleash towards any of their enemies in the West. I think that's what the general
Yeah,
assessment is. That they will be using Afghanistan basically an umbrella of terrorism and all of the terrorist groups and networks, so that they could then, at any moment, if they wish, they could unleash them, and all of the Western countries who are engaging them and facilitating their access to the populations in diaspora or within their own populations in their countries, or basically making themselves vulnerable to such a situation where then Moscow could say, we could do all of these things unless you don't do this, through all of these networks that they have established by then. So hopefully people will be hesitant and don't move forward further along down the line of engagement. I'm sure Washington is not considering such proposals to have Taliban representative in Washington. And contrary, I think there is a discussion about how to start becoming more proactive in terms of addressing the threats that are being evolved within the country. And the recent statement by the embassy to similar warning to the citizens not to travel to Afghanistan as an indication, and other aspects as well, having Taliban being mentioned in a White House statement as a specially designated terrorist group is also a positive signal, and marking of 26th August as a day of tragedy, to remind Americans of
yeah,
what they've lost in Afghanistan. And also their increasing interest in getting back Bagram is also positive signs to see how that will evolve. So let's see how things will change. If we can conclude, Mr. Keys, there's a lot I could talk to you about. There's a lot that
hmm,
I can ask, but maybe uh, I will let those questions in future segments. We'll of course bring you back, and we'll talk about other aspects as well. But in terms of the solution, so right now we are
hmm,
faced with the situation. This is a
yeah,
problem. It's a tragedy. It's a threat. Whatever that you call it. It's a problem. It needs to be addressed. There are various solutions that people think. Afghans and the international community, as you said, some people think engagement, maybe that would help. Wait for another 40 years, 30 years, like the
hmm,
Iranian regime that they waited for so long
yeah,
to see that maybe this Iranian regime will move and reform and change. But that did not happen. We saw an extremist group when they take over a state, no matter how long you give them, they become much more extremist. They become much more dangerous,
yeah,
especially if they get access to powerful weapons. So that is not a viable solution by smart people. I know there are some people who are still proposing it. Maybe they should look into the mirror and see what are the successful cases that we could see. There is none. There are other people who say that we should arm the opposition, the Afghan resistance, those who are fighting against the Taliban, that they need to be supported in order for them to take on. And as you said, the Ukraine is still a problem, and until that is being wrapped up, I don't think the world leaders will start taking that option very seriously, or maybe whether there's appetite or not to arm the Afghans against the Taliban. That's another question. But something that is now being much more widely discussed is about a possibility of a people's uprising. That if the people of Afghanistan
hmm,
could all rise up throughout the country, millions of Afghans, if they could rise up, 100,000 Taliban fighters or
Mhm.
50,000, 60,000, I mean, they wouldn't be much in front of that. And maybe that could be a successful scenario. What do you think, from your perspective, is a possible solution? And what could the international community to do in order to support such a solution, in order to address this problem?
Yeah, I think there are two approaches. One, and they both have to be implemented. One is we need to be sure that the educational system in Afghanistan is getting worse than it is now, and it's already in a bad shape. So, because look to the situation in the Middle East, we see a lot of organizations like, for instance, Hezbollah and Hamas, who had get the space for the last decades to grow and influence population, which is a disaster. So we should try to stop the manipulation and indoctrination of the young generation. So it's priority number one. And we can only do it by remote education, by injecting the system continuously with knowledge, with ideas, with and I think the only way to do it is to get people who not people like Europeans and Americans to do it, but we need Afghans or maybe neighboring countries, people with knowledge, which is suitable for the situation in Afghanistan. If you talk to the Pashtun communities, you have to talk their language, but still see to it that they will not be manipulated or indoctrinated. So I think that's number one. If we don't do that, we will lose. Whatever we do, whatever opposition there is, whatever kind of counter-military operations, it won't work because the people on the ground are already totally brainwashed. So that's priority number one. The second approach is, and this is very complicated, to be honest, because I don't want to make the same mistake as we probably did 20 years ago when we entered Afghanistan. It's a very diverse, well, I don't have to tell you, but to the viewers, it's a very diverse, country with a lot of different communities and a lot of different interests as well. And we have leaders who are not always representing the interests of their people. They're representing their people, their communities, but they're not necessarily representing their best interests. So I talk about warlords and the other, the whole history, which includes also religious groups. It's not only ethnic, it's also religious. So I think lesson number one is not to fall in the trap again, that we create a new almost civil war situation. So, even without the Taliban, we might then create a kind of total instability and terror situation. So that's number one in this perspective. So how can we do it is find a common interest. And who can do this? I think we should have a full neutral ground. It should not be a big state. It should not be a nation that has an interest already for a long time. It should be totally independent. So I think that's very important. I don't think we can probably do this in Islamabad. We probably need another venue in the world. It doesn't have to be in the West. It can be anywhere else. So that's all. But we have to take into consideration not to go into one direction in terms of, okay, we support this group and not that group. Now, I know there are a lot of initiatives already, but one mistake we can make is go back to only the old generation, because the old leadership has also a second generation. So we have to give them an opportunity with a different perspective to create the group. So don't go back only to the old wise men.
Mm.
Try to include young people from the very beginning. I think that's important.
Mhm.
And then the question is an uprise. Well, to have an uprise, you need an alternative already. Only uprising and then see, okay, now, okay, so we won the battle, but now we have to win the war. And how can we define the success of winning the war? That's very difficult. Because what kind of system do we want? How we want to create it, and with support from whom? So I think it's a very difficult task. But I agree with you. It's a priority at this moment. There are a lot of initiatives already. So let's see whether, especially the diaspora, has certain representatives, intellectuals,
Mhm.
who can guide this approach for the months to come.
Yes. Yes, definitely. Let's see how things will evolve. Thank you very much, Mr. Cees Roels, retired diplomat, a former official of the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and as someone who has been involved on the ground in Afghanistan from the early days of the international community's mission, and periodically throughout the years, and a keen observer of the situation, not just in Afghanistan, but also of the broad region and hotspots around the world. We are honored to have you. It was great talking with you. Thank you very much for your time. And for all of the viewers, this was our show. Until the next episode, thank you very much. God bless you. God bless Afghanistan. God bless our world. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadiq. Thank you.
Thank you.